All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be breaking down the 2023 expectations for new Volunteer starting quarterback Joe Milton. He replaces Hendon Hooker, who has gone to the NFL. And, of course, we'll sit here and talk about him for a couple of minutes. I think he's certainly earned that right after the last couple of seasons. 69% completion rate, over 6,000 yards, a phenomenal TD-INT ratio of 58-5 the last two seasons, over 1,000 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns as well. You know, Nick, this was strange for Tennessee. What's happened over the last couple of seasons seems very improbable. Jeremy Pruitt, of course, gets fired because, McDonald's bags and recruiting violations. And after that, the fallout was just impeccable. I mean, you had 25 to 30 guys, I believe I counted a couple years ago, that had entered the transfer portal in reaction to that. Numerous high-end recruited players decommitting, and the sky was just falling, completely down on Tennessee when it really seemed like it was going up with Jeremy Pruitt. It really seemed like he was building something there. Hendon Hooker was already committed to Tennessee before the Pruitt firing, and I was upset when he decided to stay loyal to the Volunteers because I felt like this was just a bad opportunity. He was going to have nobody around him. They were going to be trying to pull themselves out of the dumps because the fallout was going to be that massive. And instead, he puts together a Heisman-like season. Him and Josh Heupel had the #1 ranking at one point after beating Alabama this past year. And, of course, Josh Heupel, a lot of people did not feel was the correct hire, and they thought it was a panic move, which I think it kind of was at the time. But regardless, Tennessee made the move to bring in Heupel. It didn't seem like a great fit with Hooker originally because at Virginia Tech, he was really known for his ability to run, didn't really showcase much arm talent. And, here we are a couple of years later, Nick, an improbable run by Tennessee. It's just amazing what is came full circle, and that means that Hendon Hooker also has a good shot at the NFL now.
It is incredible what's happened at Tennessee over the past, 2 seasons with Josh Heupel. Unbelievable turnaround. Jeremy Pruitt seemed like Pruitt was heading in the right direction. They had that 2019 season where, solid season. They started off very poor. I think they lost to BYU and Georgia State in the first week. Then they ended up making a bowl game, beating Indiana in a bowl game. It seemed like Pruitt was putting things together, right? Former Nick Saban assistant seemed like he was the right hire. Then, the McDonald's bags and all that stuff kind of falls apart. And Tennessee looked like they were going to, good old Tennessee, right? Always finding a way to screw it up and just, being down in the dumps of college football. Hendon Hooker comes in, transfers from Virginia Tech, where he wasn't a bad player at Virginia Tech by any stretch of the imagination. I thought he was a pretty average player, pretty solid player in most cases. I thought he was good for what Virginia Tech was, a mid-tier ACC team, never really going to shock the world or anything like that. Comes to Tennessee where expectations are a lot higher, They want to win now in Rocky Top, and it didn't seem like that was going to be the case under Josh Heupel. But then they have this sort of LSU-esque breakout season where everything kind of starts to clicking, and the offense is just on fire. The stats on Hooker are fantastic. 6,000 yards, 58 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, just incredible numbers through the air. Beats Alabama for the first time in 15 years. #1 team in the nation. All that. It's a shame that it kind of ended the way it did, and Hooker got hurt. It certainly is a shame for Tennessee because I think this was their best chance to win a national championship they're going to have for a while. I don't think they're going to regress an incredible amount, but I think they are going to regress similar to how LSU regressed following their national championship. I think it's going to be, there will be a drop-off in Tennessee's play, and that's no fault to Joe Milton, but I just think that it's going to be tough to keep up that energy, especially with the schedule coming up this year. You got to travel to Bryant-Denny, have a couple tough other games. You travel to the Swamp this year. Other tough games at Kentucky is always a tough game. So I think what they had this past season, what Hendon Hooker did was fantastic. He deserves to be in the NFL as long as he rehabs his ACL fully. Should have won the Heisman had he been fully healthy. And I think this has been a fun experience for Tennessee for this past season. I think Tennessee fans absolutely loved how it started. They may not have loved how it finished, but Hendon Hooker had a great career turnaroing, and he's going to find himself a home in the NFL, absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard to have school records at a place like Tennessee, but his 20 straight games of passing touchdown is the highest mark in Volunteer history. That torn ACL was suffered on November 19th, and that blowout loss to South Carolina that really ended their season because they would have had a shot at the playoffs, I believe, if they stayed undefeated. They would have fallen right in there to #4, I believe. NFL draft-wise, projection as, a third-round pick, I think right now is kind of the census. And like you said, he was the fan vote Heisman winner where Caleb Williams won at the ceremony. They did announce that the Nissan fan vote winner was Milton, or Hooker rather. But looking at him as a prospect, this is a guy that really puts the ball in harm's way. He's got some really good touch, a nice compact release, some good downfield velocity. The biggest thing that's not great for Hooker here, though, is that he struggles to extend plays. The system he's in limits the off-scheduledness, and he does not really get to showcase his ability to make plays when things break down. He is a guy that falls forward. He's a really good runner due to his size, but he's not a guy that can run around and exactly make plays out of the pocket consistently. I think the biggest problem here with Hooker is, can he learn, a pro-style offense? His mechanics are not always strong. And, one thing that I think is certainly a plus is he has good short yardage timing and accuracy. So he does have those traits that are going to extend to the NFL. But that's the biggest question, is you're not going to have this style of offense with all this movement and, very simple concepts for you to process like he did at Tennessee. He is also just turning 25 years old. How do you think he compares to a guy like Stetson Bennett, who's also the same age and is also going to be battling for a third round or a day 3 selection, who has spent time the last couple of years in a pro-style offense and has absolutely thrived?
I think Stetson Bennett is probably the more attractive draft prospect currently. Of course, his arrest that occurred just this morning at the time of recording this certainly plays an impact in his draft stock. I think Stetson Bennett's arrest will hurt him significantly. That's a bad look for a guy to be 25 and making mistakes like that really, are just, stupid mistakes that normally you see out of a younger player. I think Hendon Hooker is a solid player. The torn ACL was probably scaring some teams away. I certainly think that it makes sense to scare a few teams away. That's a tough injury to rehab from, and certainly when you are a running quarterback who's got that sort of, has that good speed and get up to 1,000 yards in the ground, having a torn ACL doesn't help with that. I think Hendon Hooker slots into the 3rd, 4th round. I think he'll find a team, be a solid backup for a team in the NFL. I think just nothing more than that for now, but he could fight his way to get a starting position. I think there is an opportunity for him to grow and develop as long as he continues to rehab his ACL and doesn't have any more long-term injury issues that come back from that.
Now looking at Joe Milton, this is a guy that's going to be entering his 6th year in college football, started at Michigan, ended up at Tennessee. The expectations for him, I think they're going to be sky high. That's what we're going to discuss, Nick, if those are fair or not. He was great in cleanup duty this year, got the final 2 starts of the year. Blowout win over Vanderbilt. Wasn't all that impressive, only 147 yards, completed about 52%. They won by 56, so it really doesn't matter. He was phenomenal against Clemson, 19 for 28, 251, 3 touchdowns. And he was also missing his top 2 pass catchers, and that's something he's going to have to deal with out in 2023. Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt, these guys are all gone, and I think Hendon Hooker's departure is also big. That's a big mentor for him. They alluded to his relationship with Hooker many times while he was playing the final 2 games of the year. And how will Milton fare without Alex Golesh? Obviously, it's probably not that massive of a deal for Tennessee to lose him, the offensive play caller. Went to South Florida because this is still Josh Heupel's system. And, they're still going to tailor it around whoever the OC is. It's not going to be too hard. So I don't think that is a massive storyline to follow, but it could certainly impact him. Overall, what do you make of Joe Milton, Nick? Because he's one of my favorite players in college football just because of how exciting he is, because he can throw the ball 1,000 yards down the field, it seems like. He has an absolute cannon. We've seen that from him when he first got an appearance at Michigan. 10 touchdowns, no picks, a little under 1,000 yards, and only 82 attempts this past year. But I think a lot of people are going to expect a lot out of him this year, and it's going to be tough because there is going to be that expected fall off, especially since, Hendon Hooker was so good at protecting the football, and, Milton didn't have any interceptions himself, but now with this extra workload, he's going to be throwing the ball 35 to 45 times a game. How do you think he will do this season in Rocky Top?
Like I said, the expectations in Rocky Top are sky high, right? This is a fan base that has been starving for success for the past 15 years, and they finally got their first glimpse of it in a very long time by being ranked number 1 in the nation for a small portion of this season. Those fans are going to expect a continuation of that, but I think the Tennessee's in line for a drop-off. I think it's going to be similar to what happened at LSU, like I said earlier, in 2019 and 2020. It's not going to be as severe of a drop-off. I think this team will still be solid, a solid bowl-eligible team will put up some good wins. But the schedule is tough, and I think Joe Milton, he loses Cedric Tillman, loses Jalen Hyatt. A lot of talent's gone, loses the play caller, of course. I agree with your sentiment. I don't know if losing the play caller is as big of a deal because they do have Josh Heupel, and this is his system. But I think, he's going to make some mistakes. The arm is great, right? Great arm strength, but I think he has the potential to overthrow receivers, throw into some tough situations, a couple picks here and there. We didn't really see that in the Clemson game, but I think it's completely possible over the span of a season to make mistakes and throw interceptions when you're not comfortable, make some mistakes in the pocket. I don't expect Milton to have a terrible season. I think it'll be, a pretty good season by most standards, but I think for Tennessee fans, they're going to be disappointed because this is a team that they want to see success from. They want to be competing for the SEC every single year, and I just don't know if this team could do that this year. The East has gotten better and continues to get better. I think there's a lot of improvement in the East. We saw that with South Carolina. Kentucky's a solid team. Georgia, of course, are still the dominant foe that they are in the East. So I think Tennessee's going to find themselves in a situation where they're going to struggle this year, and some of it's going to be on Joe Milton, but some of it's going to be on losing the talent that he had in the past season. They're going to have to try and regroup and kind of re-recruit and get this talent back in there to build this team into a solid team in the future and lead this team to success.
Now, Joey Hasel, he is the quarterback coach, at least was in the past, and he is now going to be promoted to offensive coordinator. So I certainly think that's good news for Milton. Another 2 bullet points here. One is how much has the Florida native developed, in some of the struggle areas when it comes to the feet, learning to take some of the, repertoire he has on the ball off, because obviously he throws with great velocity, but touch is certainly an issue. Because if you remember, Joe Milton was the starter in 2021 when Heupel arrived. He got the start against Bowling Green, was not that impressive. And then the next week against Pittsburgh, where Kenny Pickett really introduced himself to the world during a great 2021 season. He was benched in favor of Hooker because I remember vividly in that first quarter, there was at least 7 guys that were wide open. He just continued to overthrow them. That is certainly a big problem. You see with guys like Mahomes in the NFL, Josh Allen, big-time arms like Milton, and they have great control and great touch. So I certainly think that, along with, his feet, and I think mental processing is something that's certainly going to be tested throughout the year. How do you think that Milton will have developed over these past couple of years? And at the same time, he has to manage these now big expectations. Full circle, how do you think everything's going to go for Joe Milton? I know you've kind of alluded to a big drop-off, but considering the things I just talked about, how do you feel about those?
I think it will be a big drop-off for the team, but I think Milton will have a pretty solid season when we come to the end of it. I think he'll be, hovering around that 60% completion percentage, probably, plus 10 on the TD to interception ratio. I think he probably has grown. I think that's, spending time on the bench and kind of learning the system, working hard over the past couple of seasons. I think he'll be able to kind of work on some of those mistakes and some of those flaws in his game that we talked about, the feet in the pocket, overthrowing receivers. Like you said, in that pick game, just overthrew so many receivers. I think that's the big issue, is overthrows really a worry about here. I think he's kind of worked on that. We saw that in the Clemson game. The tape in the Clemson game is solid, cut down the overthrows there. So I think Milton will have a good season. I just think the talent around him is kind of going to drop off a little bit. I think they've just lost too much talent and so much momentum. I expect Tennessee to have a bit of a drop-off, like I said, but I think Milton will have a solid season. I just don't know if Tennessee fans are going to be happy with this season because, like I said, they expect a lot there in Knoxville, and I just don't quite see them living up to the expectations.
Guys like Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, I think Ramil Keaton's also coming back. Those are going to be the guys you focus on. So we'll see what happens on that front. Overall, though, I think Joe Milton, I'm going to set the bar about 3,000 passing yards with this system. That's certainly achievable. I think, 65% completion rate and 30 touchdowns. Those are going to be my expectations. Do you think those are too lofty for Milton? Do you think we hit those marks? And, I'm very interested to see how he does, because I definitely think those areas I talked about, accuracy included, I think he is gonna showcase good improvements in those areas. So are those numbers too much to ask for, or are they in line with how you're feeling about Milton?
I think 3,000 could make sense. During his 5 starts in relief this past season, in different game appearances, he had almost 1,000 yards passing and 10 touchdowns. So I certainly think it's possible to kind of hit that total that you suggest with 3,000 yards. I think that could make a lot of sense for Milton. I think the system helps him. I think he's gotten better and developed himself as a passer. And I think he's going to have a chance here to kind of shine. But I also think that, losing Hyatt and Tillman are huge losses. I do think there is some talent still in this roster, but losing Hyatt and Tillman's a tough thing to replace. So we're going to see how that goes.
Now, he does have 5-star number 1 quarterback incoming in Nico Lamavaliva. He's going to be breathing down his neck. Do you think that factors into the equation this season? Or, do you think that Nico will see no time with the first-team offense this year?
I don't think Nico will get significant time.
With the first-team offense, certainly possible to get some garbage time when blowing out teams on their schedule, but I think that Heupel knows, and that the 5-star Nico knows, that he's going to be able to sit out this year and get back into it, probably starting in the season after 2024. I think that's just too soon to throw the 5-star into it.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an interesting dynamic that some people are kind of forgetting. Young guy, 18 years old, but he's full of talent. Seems like a very confident young man. So if Milton struggles, he potentially might get the go. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. This was a fun one, Nick. Joe Milton, I think he's going to be in for a very good season. We'll see what happens. 6'5", 245. This guy's got plenty of size and arms. So make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.